The story is told that first man went out hunting one day, and he chased down a deer and he shot it, and after he had killed it, he cleaned it and he cut it up and he carried it back home. When he got home, he cooked up the meat and he served up the meal with first woman. And the two of them ate the venison and they were full and they were happy. And she looked down and she said, "Thank you for dinner." And first man said, "What did you just do?" And she said, "Well, I thanked my vagina for dinner." And he said, "Your vagina? Did your vagina hunt down a deer? Did it shoot it? Did it clean it? Did it cut it up? Did it bring that meat home and cook it and serve it?" He said, "I did all those things." And she said, "But if it wasn't for my vagina, you wouldn't have done all those things." Well, he didn't think that was funny. And the two of them began to bicker and argue and then got very angry at one another. And he got up and he said, "I don't need this. I'm leaving." And he walked away. And he went into the village and he said to all the men, "Come here, come here, come here." And they came and said, "What?" He said, "We're leaving." And they said, "Leaving what?" He said, "We're leaving the women behind. We're starting a life of our own." And they go, "We don't like that idea." He says, "You don't get it. The women are never going to make us happy. Get your things." And everybody reluctantly went home and got everything together and then left with first man. They went across the river to the other side, and there they set up their own village with just them. Now, as the year had gone by, the women had been doing their farming in the fields behind the houses, and there was plenty of food when wintertime came. But the men weren't so prepared. And so that first winter, the women ate very, very well, and the men just barely survived. That spring, as the waters began to rush down the river again, the women came out on their side and waved across to the men and said, "Hello." And the men said, "Hello." And the women said, "Well, do you miss us?" And the men just looked at them. And the women said, "Do you miss these?" And they lifted up their skirts and they shook their booties. And the men just looked at them and said, "Do you miss these?" And the men just looked at them. And the women said, "You know, we're right here whenever you're ready." They turned around and went home. Well, that year the women planted, but without the help of the men in the fields, it was a little harder, and they didn't get quite as big a crop out of it, but still it was substantial enough. The men, they had enough of a time during the year to prepare to hunt and to dry the meat, and they had enough. And that winter went by, and when the waters ran through the springtime river again, the women came down to the edge of the water on their side, and they said, "Hello." And the men said, "Hello." And the women said, "Do you miss us?" And the men didn't say anything. And the women said, "Do you miss these?" And they shook their booties. And the men didn't say anything. And the women said, "Do you miss these?" And the men didn't say anything. And the women said, "You know where we're at, whenever you're ready." And they went home. Well, that third season did not go well for the women. It was bad for weather and bad for all kinds of things, and the crop was very, very small. The men, on the other hand, the hunt went well, and they put up a lot of meat. But that next springtime, when the waters ran down the river, the women came to the edge of the river and said, "Hello." And the men said, "Hello." And the women said, "Do you miss us?" And the men said nothing. And the women said, "Do you miss these?" And that's when the men realized how much weight the women had been losing. And then the women said, "Do you miss these?" But there just wasn't the same fullness there was before. And the women said, "You know where we're at?" And they went home. And the men went back to first man and said, "This has got to stop. Our women are wasting away." And the man said, first man said, "Maybe when they waste away enough, they'll come to us and apologize." And the men said, "We don't want it to go that way. We're lonely. We want to go home." And first man said, "But I don't want first woman to win." And they said, "It's not about winning, we're all losing." And first man thought about that for a bit. And then he walked over to the edge of the river. And he called out, "Hello." And first woman stood up and she said, "Hello." And first man said, "I was wrong, I got angry." He says, "I didn't need to be so angry." And she said, I was wrong too. I didn't give you credit. I know you did good things. And so the women came to the edge of the river, and some of them were so excited that they jumped in to try to swim across, but the waters were rushing too hard, and some of them got carried away, never to be seen again. That's sad. But eventually the men got back to the other side of the river, and the husbands embraced the wives, and they frolicked again for the first time in a very long time. And I guess I understand that there were hard times, but mostly no one ever wanted to leave again. And that is my story.